Hey guys, I'm Blake Comfort, and I wanted to introduce myself and give you guys a background on what we've been doing for the last 16 years since I started my professional career. Long story short, we've been having a ton of fun building a manufactured home community real estate portfolio since I was 18 years old. Just some clarity I wanted to bring to the journey on where we've been and where we've come from. We started in 2008, we started going to a Rich Dad education seminar. And it was my dad and I and my sister. We had read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and it kind of kicked us off on a journey to get into real estate investing. And the big North Star goal was to get to where we could have $20,000 a month passive income after tax. And that was always kind of our North Star. It was financial freedom. And Rich Dad, Poor Dad gave us a good baseline. And then it was like, okay, what do we actually do? What does that really mean to get into passive income? And so it became this journey that we started. And I actually missed 3 or 4 days of my senior year in high school to go to this seminar with my dad and my sister. So we were there for 3 days. This was one of those unpaid seminars. So then that was like our first interaction with the fact that it was going to be a wind up and a pitch to buy a course. So long story short, we found out about and bought a course on manufactured housing. And so I owe the whole concept of Rich Dad, Poor Dad and Robert Kiyosaki some gratitude. And through that whole process, we did learn. It was $26,000. I'll never forget that because it was a lot of money. Still is in hindsight, but it was full of information. You could argue that it was pretty generic, but at the same time, we went through it and enjoyed. The course was like 1 or 2 days a week, early like webinars, internet. We were watching some guy in Florida, I believe, and he was teaching a class specifically about mobile home parks, manufactured home communities as an investment. So that was like our baseline foundational knowledge. So there's a lot of speculation out there that we had a lot of money. We borrowed $26,000, the entire amount, from my grandma, my dad's mom. Because that was a moment in time where my family was having to pivot from construction. My dad was a general contractor and also an amazing human. We really enjoyed working together, and unfortunately we lost him, and he passed away a few years ago now in 2022. But we were really close and had a great go at it. We learned and grew together as a family, and it was really a special time. I wouldn't change it. I regret nothing about how it came together. I honestly wouldn't do it differently because we learned so much that we needed to fail in certain ways in order to truly learn. So we started at, call it a negative 26,000, probably worse than that because dad had some credit card debt at the time. And I was just eager to learn and eager not to go to college. And I didn't want to spend any money on college. I really was against it. Don't ask me exactly why. I wasn't a school kid. I wasn't destined for college. Even at probably 12, 13 years old, if you were to ask me, I would have told you, no, I'm not going to go. From there, we bought the course. We started understanding what manufactured housing communities and the operation of mobile home parks, trailer parks. I mean, the early ones we were looking at, I would call them in a classification, a 1 to 2 star trailer park. It was just 1950s and 60s era trailers that were in these communities. So we started studying the market. And I mean hundreds, if not thousands of mobile home parks. We would look at, underwrite. I would call the brokers. I got my real estate license, sold a few like residential condos and stuff just to make a couple bucks, understand some contracts and some legal along the way. There's some really good training. So I hung my license with Prudential in the day. And my dad was pursuing construction development jobs while we were basically as a family doing a side hustle. So we went through this and finally landed a couple deals in escrow. And the first deals we actually got in escrow were in Somerset, Pennsylvania. I'll never forget. We flew out there. It was colder than heck that time of year. And we walked the mobile home parks with the seller trying to sell the deal to us. Luckily, it wasn't no strings attached escrow. It was a 30-day due diligence. So we were out there. We had a deposit that we funded from a credit card. I think the purchase price of these was like $800,000, and they were willing to take a $10,000 earnest money deposit. And it was refundable if we pulled out in escrow. And so we go out there, we froze our butts in Pennsylvania. We learned that there's a lot of private sewer and water systems in that neck of the woods. We learned that there's a lot of utility risk in mobile home parks specifically. So long story short, we had a few red flags on that deal and we pulled out. Second deal we tied up after, I'd say, a lot more intensive digging on which deals to pursue. We tied up another deal in North Denver. And we decided that we'd focus kind of on the western region of the country because the utilities were more in line with what we understood. So we tied that up, seller carry concept, and it was $600,000 for a 28 unit deal. Long story short, we bought it, and the seller carried, I think it was 75%. So we had to put 25% down, which was like 150 grand, 200-ish. And that ties. So we were trying to raise a couple $100,000 in equity. So we just started calling people with a very simple looking PowerPoint / PDF that I had created. It was something in hindsight, it was super dog ugly. It looked like somebody in high school put it together. And I was at this point 19 probably. So I'd graduated high school and I'm first year out. We raised the money. 8 people, different check sizes, $25,000, $100,000 investors to get to roughly $250,000. Maybe I think we had ended up raising an additional $50 to get to $300 just because we had to rebuild the well. It was on a well and it was on city sewer. And so that was essentially my college. I mean, that one good portion of it, call it my first semester or two. A lot of trees, broken sewer because of the tree roots. It was an old clay sewer main. The well didn't produce a lot of water, so you had to have storage, but the storage was old and it didn't have a lot of storage. And in Denver in the winter, everyone leaves their water running to keep the water lines from freezing versus using like a heat tape or a heat blanket. Anyways, we closed and had so much fun in the pursuit of the first deal we closed. And it was now in hindsight, some of the funnest and most adrenaline rushed filled days in the deal making side of our career because we were so ignorant to so much. So we went from that first deal, $20,000 of additional credit card debt, did our first deal, made very little money, basically management fee of a few $100s a month because the rents were $400 when we first got it times 28 units. Our main goal was to buy at least one community a year. So we started buying another community. We bought it, the second one outside of Durango, Colorado, which was a cool little ski town. In that moment, when we go to tie up and put that community in escrow, my father goes completely blind. And so we're one mobile home park in. My dad is working to become a developer in San Diego, which was his specialty as in his career was building multifamily in San Diego, but didn't own any. So it was not like he had a bunch of money coming from apartment ownership or anything like that. He was a builder and really was a contractor, and that was his skill set. So we went from kind of really pushing to do the side hustle with the mobile home parks to having to ice it and put it on the back burner. We still were in pursuit of the second mobile home park. We were able to get a couple of extensions because of the scenario. And through even his blindness, my dad did not even see that mobile home park. We were about to go, like the trip was booked and he went blind. And early on, we had another partner, a friend of dad's, come in. He could have another contractor's eyes on it. So we continued and raised the money even through dad's blindness and bought that mobile home park. Some of the most challenging times was him going blind for all of those other reasons too, just emotional and challenging family dynamics. But also he had been awarded and realized basically a new job as a developer, as a consultant, a third party, to build a 278 unit apartment in Chula Vista. So we kind of had two meaningful deals on the table, a huge development contract. It was a $50 million, I think mid-50s, $50 million multifamily development, ground up. That was like bank-owned land at the time. So we had that kind of click through and this Durango mobile home park that we were in pursuit of. And we ended up being able to negotiate our way and proceed through both. And that's the kind of thing that you can't, no matter what, like you can't take away those days of challenging moments. Those were the times that we really earned our stripes. And I call it the time of my time in the fire. So I then became my dad's guide dog, literally. I was basically a dog for dad, pulling him around as a blind man. And I'd say I was like early version of AI. I was his email assistant. I read every single thing to him, whether that's an email versus the plans for the construction of that 278 unit. So that was not something that was planned. I didn't intend to do that, but it was now some of the most amazing experience that I had was I got a seat at the table on $50 million construction process development. And we ended up building it for the next 3 years and we came out of the ground. So that was one of the best deals that the sponsor and still to this day, a mentor, a friend of ours in the apartment multifamily space, we just were the developer. They leased it up and it appraised and refinanced at a $95 million valuation. And it was built for 50-ish. So I was along for the ride on that. I learned a ton about deal structure, raising equity from the sidelines, just seeing them as essentially a developer's assistant. Because unfortunately, my dad never recovered his eyesight. It was an optic nerve damage issue with both of his optic nerves. So that was a catalyst moment. And I'd say something that most people don't understand is we didn't have a magic bullet. There wasn't anything that special with our family. We really didn't have that much money. My dad, in essence, was like a general contractor, poor dad, until he read the book and went to the classes. And I was fortunate enough to go through that at a young age with him. So we kept buying mobile home parks pretty slowly, but we bought the one outside of Durango that year. We were able to raise the money. It was 1.325. I'll always remember the deal. The amount of equity was like $650,000. It needed some work, but it was pretty new. It was like an early 2000s build mobile home park. This is pretty rare. So we bought that one. Then we bought another one in northern Arizona, and that cracked us into Arizona. And we really fell in love with the desert operations of mobile home parks versus snow and weather, and having to deal with freezing pipes and things of that nature. So we continue to buy mobile home parks, but it's a slow grind at that point because the main focus is sort of survival, family dynamic. Dad's blind. He was the patriarch slash earner, main income earner of the family. So I made sure the bills were covered from the development contract. And then we pursued the mobile home parks as a back burner side hustle. But we kept going. So we've transacted, I think, over 38 communities in total. We still own and operate 25, going to 26 here shortly. We've full cycled the difference there, so I think 13. And we own and operate 2,500 units with an apartment partnership Dad had at the end of his career. We operate that, so it's like roughly 2,500 units. And we put them all together from scratch. It's been a fun journey. So now the portfolio valuation is probably 300 to 350 million. And it's been a really interesting, fun experience learning how to do deals, raise equity, deal structure, the legal, you name it, the insurance, then building the team, which now I'm extremely proud of. We've been very blessed in the people and the team that we've built. There you have it. That's our story in a nutshell of how we went from roughly $26,000 borrowed from grandma to a $300 to $350 million real estate portfolio that we actively manage and asset manage. All right. If you're enjoying this content, hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications, and check out the description below for our websites listed. Thanks a lot for joining.